My name is Isabel Tron, and 5 years ago, I was just a girl with a suitcase full of dreams and a laptop that barely worked, running a PR agency from a tiny studio in San Francisco. Today, I'm sitting in the corner of a candlelit cafe in Paris, watching my husband and his family fall apart in real time. But let's go back to the moment that started it all. It was supposed to be my birthday dinner, my night. A rooftop restaurant with a panoramic view of the Eiffel Tower, bathed in golden twilight, champagne flutes clinking, the scent of fresh peonies in the air. The kind of evening most people only dream of. Julian, my husband, had said it was a family-planned affair this time. Let them do something for you this year, love. You always carry the weight. So I let go. For once, I didn't oversee the seating chart. I didn't confirm the guest list. I didn't even preview the menu. That was my first mistake. We entered the restaurant together. The maitre d' greeted us like royalty, leading us past hushed tables and sweeping velvet drapes toward the private terrace. I could see them already, Julian's entire family gathered around a long, elegantly set table. His mother, Claudine, sparkling in her diamond collar. His sister, Camille, already sipping from a flute of Dom Perignon. 12 chairs. But something was wrong. My heart gave a quiet stutter as I counted. 12 people. Das I? 12 chairs, no empty seat. I paused. Julian looked back at me, then turned to the table and casually said, with a half smile, "Oops, guess we miscounted." The family laughed, not raucously, not cruelly, just comfortably, like this was all just a funny little mix-up. Camille tilted her glass toward me and said, "Oh dear, how awkward." But I wasn't laughing. My fingers clenched around the clutch in my hand. The maitre d' looked at me nervously, already sensing the misstep. But no one moved to offer their seat. No one called for an extra chair. No one even asked if I wanted to sit. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message, a scene, rehearsed and deliberate. A slow-motion car crash disguised as a toast. I stood at the edge of that marble floor, surrounded by glittering silverware and two perfect smiles, and felt the heat rise behind my ribs. My skin prickled, not from embarrassment, but from clarity. I looked at Julian. He gave a small shrug. Not even an apology. I smiled then, a slow, devastating kind of smile. "Seems I'm not family," I said, my voice calm, each word like ice and crystal. And then I turned and walked away. The maitre d' called after me. Julian said something I didn't catch. Someone laughed again, nervously this time. But I didn't stop. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for a seat that had been intentionally erased. I walked out of that restaurant, down the stone steps, and across the street to a tiny cafe with flickering lamps and quiet jazz in the background. I sat at a corner table and ordered an espresso. Then, I opened my phone. And with the same calm I had used to build a business, I began dismantling the entire birthday week. Reservation by reservation. Call by call. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to learn, was that every arrangement had been made through my company. And I was still the account holder. Their week in Paris was about to vanish, just like their seat for me. And that, my friends, is where the real story begins. 5 years ago, I wasn't the kind of woman who walked out of Parisian restaurants in midnight gowns while canceling luxury dinners with a flick of her thumb. Back then, I was just Isabel Tran, first-generation Vietnamese American, raised by immigrant parents who believed in hard work, respect, and never making a scene. I was the quiet kid with top grades, the girl who interned while others partied, the one who built a PR empire from scratch while living off microwave noodles and optimism. I was invisible to people like the Moreaus. I met Julian Moreau at a Napa Valley wine launch I was running. My agency had just signed its first international hospitality client, and I had poured every ounce of energy into making that night flawless. The lighting was soft, the press was prepped, the guest list gleamed with French surnames and trust funds. Julian arrived like he owned the evening. Tall, crisp navy suit, French Riviera tan, that kind of generational charm you can't teach. He walked straight up to me and said, "So you're the magician behind all this. My mother's been looking for someone like you. But I think I'm the lucky one who found you first. I laughed. I shouldn't have. It started with coffee, then wine, then weekend flights between San Francisco and Bordeaux. He was dazzling, polished, always knew what wine paired best with which mood. And he listened, or at least he seemed to, but the cracks showed early. His mother, Claudine, made them clear the first time we met. We were in Paris for a charity auction. I wore a black silk cocktail dress and a borrowed smile. Claudine extended a hand like she was offering me a challenge. So you're Julian's marketing girl? I'm a public relations strategist, I said carefully. I run my own firm. She gave a tight smile. Ah, how American. You built something. How independent. As if that were somehow a flaw. She called me ma chérie in public, but referred to me as the PR girl when she thought I couldn't hear. Julian said, "She's just old school. Don't take it personally." But it was personal. When he proposed 8 months later, at a vineyard in Provence, under string lights and lavender air, I said yes. Not because I was naive, but because I believed love could stretch. That if I worked hard enough, loved gracefully enough, I could eventually belong. The wedding was held at a chateau in Bordeaux, half managed by my team. Every detail was perfection, except the energy. Claudine insisted the guest list be family only, which meant none of mine. Julian didn't push back. That should have been my warning. After the wedding, the undermining began in earnest. Claudine would call me to consult on hotel launch parties in Monaco, then ignore every suggestion I gave. Julian insisted I include his name as co-visionary on our hospitality partnerships, even though he never attended a single pitch meeting. They used me, smiled in public, dismissed me in private. Still, I stayed. For the dream. For what we looked like. But dreams built on performance don't last. And slowly, the truth bled through. I wasn't a daughter-in-law. I was a trophy, a decorative accessory to the Moreau brand, until I stopped fitting their aesthetic, until I became inconvenient. Which brings us back to Paris, to the birthday week that was never really about me. Julian had said, "Let my family plan this one. They want to honor you." But it wasn't a gift, it was a stage. And I was never meant to be in the spotlight. In the weeks leading up to Paris, I kept telling myself this trip would be different, that maybe, just maybe, this was Claudine's way of offering peace. That the iciness I'd felt for years was softening. That this birthday, my 36, would mark something new. I was wrong. It started with small things. First, the itinerary. I was told not to worry about anything, that the Moreau family had it handled, that I should just show up and enjoy. The message sounded warm, but to a planner like me, it felt like being deliberately shut out. Julian waved off my concerns. "Love, you plan everyone's life year-round," he said, kissing my temple. "Let them do this one for you." Fine. I stepped back. Then came the packing. Julian made odd comments as I chose outfits. "Are you sure you want to bring that?" "Mother prefers more classic silhouettes. No need to pack anything formal. They've got everything arranged." I paused at each remark. I should have pressed harder. The night before we left, I walked into Julian's office to grab my passport from the safe. His phone lit up on the desk, unlocked. He was in the shower. I didn't intend to snoop, but a name popped up. Colette B. And the preview line? "Can't wait to see you in Paris." "Have you told her yet?" My breath caught. I stared at the screen, willing it to disappear, to become something else. A marketing message, a wrong number. But no. I tapped into the message thread. The messages went back 4 months. Lunches, late-night calls, a weekend in Geneva when I thought he was in London for a conference. References to memories they'd shared before she came along. My stomach turned. Colette wasn't just some fling. She was a chapter reopened, a woman his family had once adored. One they would have gladly welcomed back. And apparently, they were planning to. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself. I deleted the chat from his phone, just enough to buy myself time. I needed space to think, to plan. That night, I lay beside him in silence as he slept, hand resting on my waist like we were still a team. But my mind was racing. The betrayal was a cut, but the planning behind it? The coordination, the timing, the smiles in front of me while they sharpened knives behind my back, that's what scorched. And the part that chilled me? They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The next morning, we landed in Paris. A private driver waited with a placard that read, "The Moreaus." The family had flown in the day before, apparently to prepare. I hadn't been invited for the advance events. Our hotel wasn't just any hotel. It was La Maison Moreau, the family's flagship five-star property in the heart of Saint-Germain. I'd helped secure their American press coverage years ago. My name was in their success, though they'd never admit it. When I entered the grand lobby, one of the receptionists looked startled to see me. "Oh, Madame Moreau, your suite is being arranged." There was some confusion. Confusion? I was eventually led to a suite on the third floor, far from the family wing. A floral arrangement had been placed on the coffee table, but the card read, "To Camille." Wrong room, wrong name. I didn't correct them. I didn't say a word. I just smiled and accepted the key. That evening was the welcome cocktail hour. Held in the garden courtyard, string lights floating above, Parisian jazz humming in the background. Everyone was dressed in creams and navy. I showed up in red. The moment I walked in, the conversation dropped half a beat. Claudine's gaze scanned me like a customs officer inspecting contraband. "You look vibrant," she said, eyes cool. Julian kissed my cheek. "We're so glad you're here." We, they, not I. I stood quietly as stories were exchanged. Vacation homes in Provence, gala committees, cousins marrying into embassies. None of it included me. I attempted a toast, raising my glass. "To family and beginnings." Claudine's voice cut in before mine even faded. "To tradition," she corrected. "A toast to the past. Not the present. Not me." Later that night, I returned to our suite and found Julian on the phone. Again. He hung up fast, too fast. I said nothing. Instead, I waited for him to fall asleep. Then I reached for his briefcase. What I found inside would turn my quiet pain into icy, focused rage. A draft legal separation agreement, signed but undated. A proposed press release, written by Claudine's PR team. Julian and Isabel have mutually agreed to part ways. They remain dear friends. And worst of all, a dinner toast script labeled "Birthday Speech, Final Draft." It read, "Some things change, some things return to where they belong. This family has always stood on the pillars of legacy and loyalty." My name wasn't mentioned once, but hers was. Colette, the woman they wanted back. And me? I was to be publicly erased, at my own birthday dinner. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with part 4. Behind the glamour, the cracks appear, where she starts collecting evidence and the emotional weight becomes sharper. By the third day in Paris, it was clear I was no longer a guest on this trip. I was an observer, watching a perfectly orchestrated performance where I had been quietly written out of the script. The breakfast invitations never came. The group excursions to museums, antique markets, even a secret vineyard tour just outside the city, all forgotten details no one mentioned to me. Julian always had excuses. Mother said it was just siblings this time. Camille wanted some time alone with me. Didn't Claudine text you? Oh, strange. Every time I tried to join in, I was met with tight smiles and phrases like, "Oh, it was just a quick thing, really." "We didn't think you'd want to be dragged around." But I wasn't dragged. I was erased. The grand gestures remained. Claudine posed for photos with me in hotel lobbies. Julian held my hand when others watched. But behind the scenes, the temperature was Arctic. Conversation stopped when I entered a room. Claudine whispered with hotel staff, with designers, with vendors, all in French, assuming I wouldn't catch on. But I understood more than they thought. At the boutique attached to La Maison Moreau, I overheard her murmuring, "Let her pick whatever she wants. It won't matter after this weekend. Julian insists on keeping things civil." Civil? That word echoed like glass breaking in my chest. I stopped sleeping. I started documenting. Each night I returned to my suite, alone, and photographed every paper, every digital receipt I could find. Julian's iPad was rarely locked. Emails with their family lawyer, correspondence with Colette, who was already staying in Paris, tucked away in a rented flat near Rue Claire. I tracked bank withdrawals, private transfers. They were moving assets, fast, and everything pointed to one conclusion. They weren't just planning a breakup, they were preparing for a financial ambush. The Moreaus, it turned out, were bleeding money. Claudine's real estate projects had quietly failed. Julian had leveraged part of my agency's collateral to fund a boutique chain that never launched. And they intended to dump me quietly before the press, or the creditors, showdowns, caught on. I wasn't just an unwanted wife. I was an inconvenient liability they needed to discard. That night, I stood at the window of my suite, watching the Eiffel Tower sparkle at the hour mark. 36 floors above a city that never stops shimmering. I thought about my parents, how they'd taught me to never raise my voice at the table, but always raise my worth when they ignore your seat. I was done begging for space. I was done smiling for photos that would be cut in post. I was done being the PR girl, cleaning up everyone else's mess while they planned mine. And then it happened. A slip of arrogance, the moment the mask dropped. I passed by the concierge desk early the next morning on my way to the hotel business center. Claudine's unmistakable voice carried over the marble counter, cold and precise. There will be 12 seats, not 13. Yes, I know what the original reservation says. Change it. No, there won't be any issues. She won't be staying for the dinner. It's a private family matter. The concierge nodded nervously. I stopped mid-step, just out of sight behind the floral divider. My hands clenched into fists so tight, my nails cut into my palms. There it was. Confirmation. This wasn't a passive oversight. It wasn't poor planning. It was premeditated exclusion. They'd decided to publicly unseat me, literally and figuratively, in front of the press, their friends, and probably Colette, too, the woman they thought was better suited to the Moreau name. But here's the thing they didn't understand. You don't corner someone who knows how to control a room from behind the curtain. They thought they were planning a spectacle? I was about to give them a masterclass in execution. I returned to my suite in silence. No tears, no panic, just precision. I opened my laptop, logged into my corporate accounts, and began to reroute everything. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the first cancellation had already been processed. Tomorrow, the birthday dinner would proceed, on the surface. But beneath the luxury linen and candlelight, the foundation had already started to crack. I didn't scream. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't give them the outburst they had choreographed for me. I did what I had always done best. I made a plan. Because while the Moreaus were planning a birthday dinner to erase me, I still had one thing they had underestimated: control. What Claudine didn't realize, what Julian never paid attention to, was that all the arrangements for this family celebration had gone through my business channels. Out of habit, out of trust, out of laziness on their part. The vineyard luncheon in Champagne, booked under my agency's French partner contract. The Seine River cruise, confirmed with one of my longtime vendor contacts, Monique. The villa weekend in Provence, paid with my corporate card, temporarily, with the promise of reimbursement that never came. Even the birthday dinner itself, the one Claudine had just coldly reduced to 12 seats, had been finalized through my assistant, under my account, with a luxury restaurant group I had helped promote in their U.S. launch. They wanted to make me disappear, so I decided to make everything else disappear first. That evening, I didn't join the family for the rehearsal walkthrough at the restaurant. I told Julian I had a headache. He didn't argue, didn't even look up from his phone. Instead, I returned to the hotel business center, opened my laptop, and got to work. The first step was to contact Marco, the general manager of Le Pavillon Étoilé, the Michelin-starred venue where the birthday dinner would be held. We'd worked together before. He remembered me well. "Of course, Madame Tran," he said in polished English. "What may I assist you with?" "I'm invoking my cancellation clause," I replied. "Effective immediately. All charges are to be refunded to the original payment method." There was a pause. Then, a private matter?" "Let's call it a change in tone," I said. "One more thing. When the Moreaus arrive, kindly request payment before the second course is served. And if they ask who canceled, tell the truth." He hesitated, but then responded quietly, "As you wish." Over the next 2 hours, I initiated the complete dismantling of their carefully curated fantasy. The champagne brunch at the Chateau de Montagne? Gone. The vintage boat tour on the Seine? Cancelled. The villa booking for the final weekend in Provence? Terminated, and every euro refunded to my account. The spa day Claudine had arranged for the ladies? The spa day Claudine, already released to a bachelorette party from Berlin. I didn't stop there. Remember the Moreau Collective project Julian had looped me into 2 years ago? A sleek hospitality meets brand ambassadorship concept that used my agency's intellectual property and contacts, but never gave me equity? I pulled every press contact, every media favor, every scheduled article, every digital asset I'd approved. I revoked them all. Their brand wasn't just going dark, it was going invisible. The more I worked, the steadier I felt. This wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. They wanted a clean break? They'd get it. They wanted to humiliate me publicly? Let them try on an empty stomach. By the time midnight rolled around, my inbox was pinging with responses, some polite, some alarmed. One from Carmen at the Provence Villa read, "Isabel, we're so sorry for what happened. Your tip to our staff will be returned separately. Wishing you strength and grace." She knew. They all knew. And that was the thing the Moreaus never understood about this world. Relationships aren't built on names. They're built on reputation. And mine, it was flawless. I closed my laptop, slipped off my heels, and stood at the window of my suite, watching the lights of Paris shimmer. They thought I was gone. A formality, a footnote. But I wasn't a footnote. I was the author of this chapter. And the final paragraph? Would be written tomorrow night, at the dinner where I would arrive on time, dressed to destroy, and uninvited by design. The night of the dinner arrived cloaked in elegance. Paris shimmered like it had dressed just for me. The rooftop terrace of Le Pavillon Étoilé glowed under crystal chandeliers strung between ancient stone columns. Waiters moved like choreography. Candles flickered in gold-trimmed votives, and the Eiffel Tower loomed in the distance, tall, silent, magnificent. It was a setting fit for royalty, or a revolution. I arrived last, by design, wearing a midnight black gown that hugged my frame like armor, slit high enough to whisper danger, and a red lip that told the world I wasn't here to apologize. Heads turned as I stepped off the elevator. Even Julian blinked. For a brief second, I saw it in his face. A flicker of memory, of the woman he'd once pursued, once wanted. And then, calculation, as if remembering the plan. Claudine rose to greet me with a practiced smile. She air-kissed both my cheeks like nothing was amiss. "Darling," she purred, "you look polished." "Thank you," I said, calm. "Where should I sit?" There it was, that delicious pause. Eyes glanced around the table. Camille bit her lip. Julian cleared his throat. "Oh," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Seems we may have miscounted." He chuckled, as if this was a punchline, not a knife. 12 chairs, 12 name cards. No place for me. The silence stretched thin, elegant, and cruel. Claudine made a show of glancing around. "Well, I suppose we could ask the staff to—" "No," I interrupted. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. Not even a little. I wouldn't want to impose. I took one slow breath, met Julian's eyes, then turned to the entire table and said, "Seems I'm not family." Gasps, nervous glances. Camille froze, her wineglass halfway to her mouth. Julian rose slightly, like he'd rehearsed it. Don't be dramatic, Isa. We can fix this. I smiled. A sharp, beautiful smile. The kind you wear when you know you've already won. No need, I replied. I've already fixed everything. I turned and walked away. Not in fury, but with precision. The maitre d' opened the door for me without a word, eyes wide with something close to admiration. I stepped into the elevator and hit the ground floor. Once outside, I crossed the narrow street and entered a quiet cafe that faced the restaurant's terrace. I ordered an espresso and sat by the window, my back straight, my phone glowing in my hand. This was the moment. They thought the show had started, but they had no idea they'd already walked onto the wrong stage. I pulled up my phone and sent a simple text to Marco, the restaurant's general manager. You may proceed. A minute later, I saw him emerge from the kitchen, flanked by 2 staff members. He approached the table, leaned in to speak to Richard Moreau, Claudine's husband. Richard's expression changed first. From confused, to embarrassed, to pale. He pulled out his wallet. Marco shook his head. I could almost hear it from across the street. No valid guarantee on file. The event planner has canceled all arrangements. Claudine stiffened, her posture snapping upright like a snapped violin string. Camille dropped her fork. And Julian? Julian was staring at his phone, because now his messages were lighting up. The villa in Provence just called. They said we're no longer confirmed. The cruise captain says the deposit's been withdrawn. Why is the press invite for the Moreau Collective launch showing event postponed indefinitely? He was starting to piece it together, and when his phone rang again, and I didn't answer, he stood abruptly, nearly toppling his chair, and stepped away from the table. I let the espresso cool. Then I stood, smoothed my gown, and walked back toward the fire I'd lit with nothing but silence, elegance, and receipts. I re-entered Le Pavillon Étoilé through the service entrance, a narrow corridor lined with polished stainless steel and the low hum of a Michelin-starred kitchen, the true heart of the place. Marco was waiting just inside, his face pale but composed. Madame Tran, he said with a respectful nod. They are unsettled. Good, I replied softly. Time for the final course. He led me through a discreet side path that opened just behind a velvet curtain near the terrace. From there, I could see the table clearly. The scene was chaos, beautifully quiet, high-class chaos. Richard Moreau was standing, arguing in hushed French. Claudine gripped the edge of the table like it was the only thing anchoring her. Camille was red-faced, whispering furiously to her husband, and Julian stood off to the side, phone to his ear, brows drawn tight, pacing like a trapped animal. I stepped forward. 12 faces turned at once. Shock, confusion, dread. Only Julian spoke. Isabel, he said, stepping forward like we were still in some kind of twisted partnership. We need to talk. What you've done, this is necessary. I finished for him. Long overdue. Claudine's mask cracked. You've embarrassed us in front of everyone, she hissed. You've destroyed a once-in-a-lifetime evening. I tilted my head. I learned from the best. Isn't that what this was supposed to be? A public spectacle? Richard stepped in, voice low but furious. You had no right to interfere with family arrangements. I turned to him and said clearly, for everyone to hear, I had every right, every contract, every deposit. Every reservation this week was made through my agency, under my company's authority, all in my name, all backed by my accounts, which means I had every legal right to cancel. Their expressions shifted, not from anger to apology, but from control to fear. Because now they knew this wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Julian lowered his voice. You don't know what this will do to us, Isa. No, I replied calmly. I do. That's why I did it. His mouth tightened. You don't understand the investors we were meeting, the accounts riding on this weekend. I gave him a sharp smile. And yet, you were about to publicly announce our separation over dinner, without warning, without negotiation, using my brand reputation as your exit strategy. His face paled. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small envelope. cream-colored, sealed in wax. Here's a copy of the bank transfers, the offshore accounts. And that neat little speech Claudine drafted for you. I placed it gently in the center of the table. Camille gasped. Claudine looked like she'd been slapped. Keep it, I said. Frame it if you like. It's the last time I'll ever write anything for this family. Camille finally found her voice. When Julian divorces you, you'll get nothing. You think this gives you power? I looked at her, calm as winter. I don't want anything, I said, except my name, my company, and my peace. But if you come after me, if you try to bury me with the press or the courts, everything I've collected goes public. I let that sink in. The affair, the asset concealment, the tax evasion, the private emails between Julian and Colette about resetting the bloodline. I have it all. Timestamps, screenshots, bank records. A waiter dropped a glass at the far end of the terrace. No one even flinched. Claudine spoke again, barely above a whisper. You were nothing before us. I smiled. And now I'm the woman who dismantled you without raising her voice. I turned to Julian. The divorce will be clean. You keep what's yours. I keep what's mine. Try anything shady, and I burn what's left of your empire to ash. He didn't respond. Couldn't. Because we both knew. There was nothing left to say. I left them there. Frozen, disarmed, powerless for the first time in their perfectly curated lives. Outside, the air smelled of rain and jasmine. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance. I flagged a taxi, gave the name of a small boutique hotel in Montmartre, one I had booked quietly days ago under my mother's maiden name. As we pulled away, I glanced back one last time at the rooftop where the Moreaus had planned to erase me. They hadn't just lost a dinner, they'd lost control, and I had never felt freer. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a high-rise suite in Tokyo. The skyline stretched endlessly in front of me, a sea of light and ambition, sleek and modern, humming with quiet power. Just like I'd rebuilt myself to be. My phone buzzed beside a tray of jasmine tea and a stack of mock-ups for a new campaign I was launching in Asia. Tran & Kodu had just been shortlisted for a global luxury partnership with a Kyoto-based heritage brand. The email subject line said, "Congratulations, Isabel. You're not just shortlisted, you're the face." I let out a slow breath, smiled. Not the kind I wore at Moreau family dinners. A real smile. One that started from deep inside. After Paris, I filed for divorce the moment my plane touched down in California. No drama, no press releases. Julian's lawyers offered settlement options. My lawyer responded with receipts. They folded quickly. The divorce was finalized quietly in San Francisco Superior Court. No alimony, no shared assets. Just a clean cut, and a non-disclosure agreement they paid me to sign, which I never needed. Because I didn't want their name. I had my own. Rumors of the Moreaus' fall spread quietly but steadily through hospitality circles. Richard stepped down from the board of their hotel group. Claudine lost 2 major donors for her prized Paris charity. Investors pulled out of Julian's boutique project. Colette appeared in Paris Match, heavily pregnant, smiling with a ring no one acknowledged. I didn't need revenge. The truth handled that for me. What I needed, and finally claimed, was peace. My phone rang. "Isabel?" My assistant's voice chirped. "They've just confirmed. You're headlining the Tokyo summit this fall. Want to fly straight from Amalfi or stop by London first?" I turned back toward the suite, heels clicking softly against polished wood floors. In 1 week, I'd be planning a celebrity wedding on the Amalfi Coast. In 2, I'd be giving a keynote in Tokyo. In 3, I'd be back in San Francisco to sign papers for a new office space, the penthouse I never thought I could afford. I was no longer Mrs. Moreau. I was Isabel Tran, CEO, strategist, survivor, storyteller. And I'd written my own ending. That night after the call, I stood alone under the Tokyo stars. I raised a glass of chilled plum wine and whispered, "To the missing chair," not in bitterness, but in gratitude. Because when they tried to erase me, they accidentally revealed me. And what they tried to take, identity, dignity, Power? They only sharpened. Have you ever been excluded, only to realize it was your liberation? Share the moment you knew you were done proving yourself and started choosing yourself instead. What part of Isabel's story resonated most with you?